Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling Eyes match preview with myself today. Chelsea away, always a tough game, really difficult to grind out results whenever we go to Stamford Bridge. But Graham Potter will be hoping for a successful return to Stamford Bridge, this time managing West Ham. So if you enjoyed the breakdown, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. And yeah, it's going to be a difficult game. Obviously, West Ham are now coming off the back of that really good second half performance away at Aston Villa in the Premier League last week. So we're definitely gaining momentum. Still no activity in the transfer window, which we were hoping maybe a couple of new signings could be ready and integrated into the team for this clash, but it hasn't happened. And as a consequence, we are having to deal with the cards that we currently have. There's a couple of things around injuries and players returning, which we'll touch on shortly. But I think the team and the squad will go into this with confidence. You know, we played really, really well against a strong Aston Villa team. And, you know, that we've definitely shown over this past 3 or 4 weeks of Graham Potter in charge that we are making progress and there are signs of things improving. And we mentioned it in the review show and kind of showed some of the illustrations to highlight that. But Chelsea, on the other hand, you know, started the season so strong, title contenders for up until Christmas. They were kind of downplaying it, especially Maresca, the likes of Palmer in interviews. But now we're starting to see some of those cracks appear. And for all the good stuff that Chelsea have done this season, they have shown vulnerable side to their game in recent weeks. So tail of the tape, going into this game, Chelsea are on 40 points, West Ham 27. Chelsea have scored 45 goals to West Ham's 28, so almost double there. Goals conceded, 30 for Chelsea to West Ham's 44. And the position in the league is 6th versus 14th. If we look at the expected data, they're both teams are kind of similar. They're tracking similar to what their expected position should be. So Chelsea expected to have 39.07 points, West Ham 23.58. Goals scored expected 49.89 to West Ham's 33.20. Expected goals conceded of 36.06 for Chelsea to West Ham's 47.35. And in expected position, Chelsea should be 5th, so one higher than they currently are. And West Ham should be 15th, one lower than they currently are. So both teams, yeah, there's clearly discrepancies between the two seasons. As I mentioned before, Chelsea had a flying start. West Ham have had an abysmal start, and we're trying to almost do the vice versa of what Chelsea are currently doing, where they're now going into a situation where they have some difficult moments, whereas West Ham are now trying to push on with a new manager. But yeah, Graham Potter will definitely feel a little bit more pressure going into this game just because of obviously what happened at Chelsea. And, you know, this is his first managerial job since Chelsea. You know, coming to West Ham. So it's going to be really interesting to see how he approaches it, whether he's aggressive, like we were again the second half against Aston Villa, whether he's a little bit more passive and, you know, shows that respect to Chelsea that they probably do deserve. But it has to be a balance, and we're going to get onto that very shortly. But just to kind of summarize Chelsea's season and focus a little bit on Enzo Maresca's team, because they have played some fantastic football this season. You know, Cole Palmer, again, has been absolutely outstanding for them. They've really shown the dangers from an attacking perspective of the players they have and the way they're trying to play. And again, he's a manager that isn't changing how he wants to play. And it's his first season at Chelsea. And I think most Chelsea fans are now just targeting a Champions League finish if they can get in there, because that would probably be considered a first successful season for him, especially if they go on and win the Conference League as well. But let's take a look at Chelsea's stats so far this season. So they currently have the 4th best defensive record in the Premier League. So that tells you how dangerous they are going forwards with 45 goals scored. And to make it even more impressive, they have the 2nd best expected offensive record in the Premier League with 49.89 expected goals scored, only worse to Liverpool. Defensively, they're not amazing. They're joint 9th, strongest defensive record in the Premier League with around 30 goals conceded, so around average. And they rank 5th for expected points so far this season on 39.07, which we already alluded to. And they're averaging around 1.96 goals per game with an XG of 2.16 and averaging 1.3 goals conceded per game with an expected goals against of 1.53. And as we already knew, Enzo Maresca's team like to dominate possession of the ball, and they average 57.3 possession in the Premier League so far this season, which is one of the highest out of all teams in the Premier League. So we know how Chelsea are going to want to play. They're going to want to control the game. They're going to want to bring the players like Cucurella into midfield and invert the fullbacks. Reece James is back now and trying to get minutes, so it's likely he'll be playing as well. So it's with Enzo Maresca, we said it in the last breakdown when we played Chelsea, and, you know, going back to that Chelsea game where we lost 3-0 at home under Lopetegui, it was an absolute nightmare. You know, and in that game, we started with a back three as well. So it'd be interesting to see what Potter does, because I think he'll also play a back three, based off how we're trying to play. But it's a very different back three for Potter than it was under Lopetegui. But yeah, going back to that 3-0, we were absolutely torn apart that day. And it was way too easy for Chelsea to pick up those pockets of space. As I mentioned, players like Cucurella going and inverted in midfield and creating overloads because we had a double pivot in midfield. They were just outnumbering us. So they had 3 or 4 bodies in there to our 2 or 3 at every time. And they were just playing through our lines so easily. I think it'll be a different story going to Stamford Bridge. Obviously, they're going to be the home team. The emphasis is on them to attack, drive forwards, commit players forward. And I think there'll be gaps. I do think there'll be gaps for West Ham to counter. Do I think we'll do it effectively? I don't know. I think against Aston Villa, especially Wan-Bissaka, he provided such a threat on that side that if Chelsea are going to invert Cucurella on that left side, it's going to leave so much space for Kudus, Wan-Bissaka, if they're playing, to really get attacking in those transitions. And I mentioned it in the first preview we did against Chelsea back in September, October time. It's the same situation. If Cucurella is inverting, that space is there to attack, because you look at Chelsea's midfield of Enzo and Caicedo, it's not the fastest. It's not. It's really quite similar to West Ham. I mean, Caicedo's a bit more mobile than some of West Ham's midfielders, but there's a similar lack of intent there. And the way for all Chelsea's good attacking philosophy that they're trying to implement, what's their recovery runs like? I remember seeing an analysis of their recent defeat to Man City, and although players are really excited and want to get forwards and are trying to drive forwards, I think it was like the 8th minute of the game. You had Cole Palmer, Madueke, Sancho, Jackson. They were all just kind of jogging or walking back, and City were just counter-attacking. And then, yeah, it was weird to see. But I think that's probably why Maresca highlighted the fact that Chelsea aren't ready to win a Premier League this season, because the top teams will get back in numbers, whether that's Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City. They've all shown how exemplary they are at that over the time. And, a club like Chelsea, you cannot isolate your, no matter how good Cole Palmer is or Madueke or Sancho as a technical player, you have to work in this team. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Maresca does set up like. But again, even playing at home, there's even more emphasis on those types of players to almost be a bit more lazy in the attacking areas. And when they're trying to get back defensively, they don't really want to do it. And I think they can get away with it a little bit more playing at home. But I think that's where our spaces are going to be. And if we're playing Wan-Bissaka wing back again, who had a fantastic game against Aston Villa, the space is going to be there, especially with, as I mentioned, Cucurella inverted into midfield. And it depends who they're going to play out on that side, because what we'll likely see is Cucurella coming inside and either Neto or Sancho on the left-hand side playing really, really high and wide. But that's where, again, if Wan-Bissaka's out there, I would back Wan-Bissaka against both of those players. Sancho's someone that's going to want to look to play ball to feet, come inside, and then we just need to isolate the pockets or the channels inside. Neto is a little bit more of a threat, but I would say easier to play against for Wan-Bissaka, just because A, he's left-footed, and B, it's pretty obvious what he's wanting to try and do. He's trying to get down the line and cross balls in. It's very obvious for Wan-Bissaka what he needs to do there. And Wan-Bissaka is excellent in those types of duels. So I'd actually prefer Neto to play in this game, even though he's a lot quicker and a lot more direct than Sancho. I think Wan-Bissaka would prefer to play against that type of personnel, which is strange to say. I think most fullbacks would prefer to play against Sancho. But yeah, I do think Neto will start over Sancho, which will help Wan-Bissaka, I believe. But defensively, Neto will work harder than Sancho. So it kind of goes both ways. But yeah, that's what we're likely to see. Obviously, Cole Palmer plays in the number 10. He really just does go where he wants to go. He'll try and find pockets of space between the lines, between the midfield and defense. That's where it scares me, because we have seen, even in the game against Aston Villa, I think it was Morgan Rogers on that day and Ramsey, they were picking up spaces between our midfield and defense early on, and we couldn't really deal with it. Second half, it was a different story when Aston Villa fatigued and we started to pick up players more. But to be honest, we need to be careful of that, because Chelsea have an abundance of quality. They're not in the position they are in the league for no reason. They weren't title contenders for no reason. And, they don't have the second highest expected offensive record in the Premier League for no reason. So they are going to create chances. They are going to have players that can find those pockets of space and at times will hurt us. But we have to be as resilient as possible and limit the number of chances that we allow Chelsea to do that with. But yeah, for me, it's a simple approach from both teams. Chelsea are going to look to overload, invert into central areas, get the ball wide to Madueke and Neto if they're playing, isolate our wing backs, and just look to kind of overloading that midfield if we are playing a back three because they can get more numbers in there. West Ham's game plan is very simple as well. We saw it against Aston Villa. It's to create overloads in wide areas on transitions, or pinning Aston Villa back. It's to then double up on the other side and get balls into the box, as we saw with the Emerson goal. So there's a clear strategy between both teams. It's just who's going to execute it better on the day and who has the resources available to execute it better on the day. You would argue Chelsea are definitely the favourites going into this one. I think for me, it all depends on Lucas Paqueta. I know Graham Potter mentioned in his pre-match press conference that Paqueta hasn't been training this week, and they're going to assess it over the next few days whether he can play. Jared Bowen as well was someone that's back in training, so I reckon we'll see him on the bench. It looks like Somerville's going to be out, and even Mavropanos is back in. I don't think Mavropanos will come back into the team, but he's available, and I think he'll be on the bench. So we do have a couple of players sneaking back in. It's a shame that Somerville won't be ready. But if Paqueta's missing, that's a huge loss for West Ham. He was absolutely brilliant against Aston Villa. And without that type of player, say it's going to be Danny Ings instead, it's a completely different game that West Ham can try and play because, yeah, Danny Ings doesn't have the technical ability or hold-up play that Paqueta does. And, yeah, he's not as intelligent as obviously Lucas Paqueta, but he is a goal scorer. But, yeah, I think West Ham's hopes, because of the current squad situation, will depend on whether Lucas Paqueta starts this game and Lucas Paqueta's fit, because he was so integral to how we played, especially in the second half. He was really fantastic. So let's look at the predicted teams and how both teams could line up going into this game. We'll start with Chelsea. Again, you'd expect Cucurella, Colwill, Chalobah, James to be the back four. It may be Tosin instead of Chalobah or Colwill. Sanchez may even be pulled out because of his recent performances. But as I mentioned, Cucurella is going to want to go into that midfield with Fernandez and Caicedo and create overloads there. And Neto's going to go high and wide, as with Madueke, who wants to isolate his fullback or wingback 1v1. As I mentioned, Fernandez and Caicedo in the double pivot. Front four of Neto, Palmer, Madueke, and Jackson. It could be someone like Sancho comes in instead of Neto. That remains to be seen. With West Ham, I've gone unchanged from our draw. It felt like a win against Aston Villa. The only doubt I have is Paqueta, which is, a shame. I don't even think Mavropanos will come back into the back three, as I mentioned, just because of how they performed. And to be honest, Mavropanos' performance haven't warranted him coming straight back into that team, despite us only having one centre-back in that back three. So, yeah, it's a difficult game for West Ham. I'll be honest. It's going to be one where we have to battle in midfield. Caicedo and Fernandez, they're a lot better technically than Alvarez and Souček, but we have that physicality element over them. And as I mentioned, in transitions, if we can win those physical battles or overturn the ball in midfield, we can create overloads in wide areas with Kudus and Wan-Bissaka, with Emerson and Soler. So obviously Soler is going to want to come in. Soler and Kudus are going to play closer to Paqueta that we saw, which then allows the space of Wan-Bissaka and Emerson to get forwards. That's how we hurt Chelsea. And that's how we're going to try and hurt a lot of teams this season. But yeah, for me, Paqueta has to be fit and ready to play for West Ham to have a chance in this match. If Paqueta isn't starting and it's Danny Ings, I'll be extremely surprised if we pick up a point. But I don't want us to rush Jared Bowen back either. If Paqueta's not available and Bowen was maybe going to be in the squad on the bench, do not start him. We cannot afford to give him another long-term injury, especially with the current situation that we've seen in the transfer market. So, yeah, look, it's a difficult game. Stamford Bridge away, it's not a ground that we notoriously do well at all in terms of victories. We've had a couple of draws. We did get a win recently when David Martin was in goal, which was, one of the better moments during that season. But for us, it's all about compactness. It's being together, something that Chelsea haven't shown in past few weeks. And that could be the difference. If we can be a cohesive unit and Chelsea start to get frustrated, start to maybe get a little bit lazy, getting back and defending, then we could see some success. Because against Aston Villa, we were fantastic going forwards, but every single player was disciplined. Every single player was tracking back and working for the team. So that could honestly be the difference. No matter the difference in quality that Chelsea may have in their team right now, I think those are going to be the key fundamentals for West Ham to get success in this game. But let me know down below in the comments, what do you think? What's your score predictions going into this game as Graham Potter returns to Chelsea as West Ham manager? I'm going to go with a 2-2 draw. It's more of an optimistic prediction. I think the statistics point towards a Chelsea win, maybe a 2-1, 3-1 Chelsea win. But Yeah, I think we could get a draw. I'm going to go with 2-2. I like how we've been playing under Graham Potter, and this would be a good start to February. And, it's a really difficult February period for West Ham as well. But yeah, let me know your score predictions down below. If you enjoyed the breakdown, do leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for more content. And until the next one, come on, you irons.